Shalom. We're continuing Sefer Melachim Aleph. We are up to Perek Yud Beis, and if you remember, Shlomo HaMelech had died. Achia Hashileni ripped the cloak, either on him or on Yeravam, into 12 pieces. 10 pieces he gave to Yeravam, and he told Yeravam ben Nevat from the tribe of Ephraim that you will rule over 10 tribes, and I will leave to Shlomo's descendants only one tribe, but one tribe means two tribes, Yehuda and Binyamin, and they will rule in the south of Yerushalayim and the Mikdash, and that is in the merit of David HaMelech. And there's also a promise that eventually the Malchus will return to David, and that's in the Zman of Mashiach. Okay, so Shlomo has died, and Rechavam is now the king. Rechavam does not know about the prophecy of Achia Hashileni. Vayelech Rechavam Shechem. Rechavam leaves Yerushalayim, and he goes to Shechem. Now that's a very strange thing. Shechem is in the territory of Ephraim, and normally a king would be anointed in Yerushalayim. That was the capital, that's the Makam HaMikdash. But Rechavam suspects that some of the 10 tribes are not that loyal to him, because remember, Yeravam was a troublemaker even before Achia Hashileni. So Rechavam wants to be coronated in Shechem, because that is kind of the central city of the other 10 tribes. And therefore Rechavam thinks he's going to get loyalty, he can establish his power there. Of course, Shechem is also a place of Peranius, Muchan the Peranius. That's where Dinah was raped, that's where Yosef was sold, so it's a bad simon to go to Shechem. But it says, Rechavam went to Shechem, ki Shechem bo'al kol Yisrael hamlichoso, because he wanted to assemble all of Yisrael to be mamlechim, to coronate him. Vayihi kishmaya Yeravam ben Nevat v'odenu b'Mitzrayim. Now Yeravam ben Nevat fled into Mitzrayim because Shlomo wanted to kill him, but in Mitzrayim, when he hears that Shlomo died, he had fled to Mitzrayim because Shlomo was going to kill him. Vayishlechu, vayikru lo, v'yavo Yeravam chol kal Yisrael, v'yidabru el Rechavam meimar. But they summoned Yeravam to come back, and Yeravam people look at as a natural leader. So he and a delegation of Israelites from the other tribes other than Judah and Binyamin, they come to Rechavam and they want to negotiate. So Yeravam doesn't revolt until they first negotiate. And this is what they said to Rechavam. Avicha hikshe isulenu. Your father Shlomo put a very hard yoke on our back. Taxation, conscription, service, excavating stones, going on ships. V'ata ata hakel mi'avodas avicha akasha. We are requesting of you that you give us a lighter load. Take off some of the burden that your father put upon us. Take off the ulo hakaved, the heavy yoke, asher nasan aleinu, v'navdeka. And if you could be a little easier on us, we will willingly accept your service. So Rechavam is new to this job. He doesn't really know, is this a reasonable request or not? Vayemer aleim, and he says to them, L'chu od shlosha yamim. Give me 3 days to think about this, and to be shayal eitzah. V'shuvu elai, come to me after 3 days. Vayelchu ha'am, and they went home. They gave him 3 days. So what did Rechavam do? Vayivaetz hamelech Rechavam es hasakein asher hayu omdim es pnei Shlomo aviv. He first turned to the old and wise and experienced advisors who had advised his father, Bioso Chai, when Shlomo was alive. Lamer, so apparently even Shlomo had advisors. Eich atem nayatzim lahashiv es ha'am hazeh davor. How do you advise me to respond to these people? Vayidabru elav lemar, and they spoke to him, saying, you better give in, be conciliatory, be nice, be reasonable, be fair. and then you will be accepted as a king. Im hayom tia eved liyamazeh. And this is actually Jewish leadership. You as a leader have to look at yourself as an eved. You are a servant of the people. They are not your servants. You're there to serve them. That is your tafkid. V'avadatam, you will serve them. V'anisam, and you will answer them. V'dibarta aleim devarim tovim, if you will speak these good and compassionate words, v'hayu lecha avadim kol hayamim, they will be your servants. They will be loyal to you if you show that you're loyal to them. So that's good advice, even though Shlomo himself didn't follow it, but it could be Shlomo can get away with things because of his unique wisdom. Rechavam, it does not have the chachma of Shlomo, so they're telling Rechavam, you got to be lighter on them. However, Pasuk Ches tells us, Vayazov esatzas hazakenim asher yatzua. He abandoned the advice of these elders that had given him this eitzah. Vayivaetz es hayeladim asher gadlu ito asher ha'omdim lefanav. He had a bunch of friends, kids that he grew up with, his contemporaries, and he wanted to see what they said. And vayomer aleim, and he said to his young kid friends, Ma atem nayetzim, what do you tell me to do? V'nashiv davar es amazeh, that I should answer the people asher dibru elai lemar, that they said to me, Hakel min ha'ol shenas navicha aleinu, make the yoke that your father put upon us, make it lighter. What should I say to their demands? So these kids basically say, gotta be tough. Again, the Navi is kind of making a mockery of them. It's saying that these people thought they were big shots. They thought they were wise. They were ignorant and they were short-sighted. And they say the following, Ko somar liyamazeh asher dibru elach lemer. This is what you should say to the people who are speaking to you. Because they are saying, Avicha ichbid esuleinu, your father made our yoke hard, and you should make it easier. Those people who want an easier life. Kai sedaber aleihem. This is what you should say to them. Katani ava mimasnei avi. This has actually become an expression even in modern Hebrew. Kitani, my little pinky, is thicker and bigger than the thigh of my father. Whatever my father gave you, I'm going to do much more. My little pinky is, so to speak, harsher than his thigh. So what do you think my thigh can do to you? Viata, avi hamis aleichem o kaved. If my father gave you a heavy yoke, ani osif alulchem, I will add on to your yoke. Avi yisar eschem bashotim. If my father afflicted you by beating you with a stick, if we consider all of this all like a stick, ani ayaser eschem biakravim, I will afflict you with scorpions. Now again, this is metaphorical, but the advice of these young guys is, if you want to be respected, if you want them to be afraid of you, you have to be tough, you have to be strong, don't give in an inch. Because if you compromise, they will have no respect for you. They'll see you like a nebuch, a wimp, and they're not going to respect you. So this is the advice of the young people. The third day, it was on the third day, that Yeravam and everybody else came to hear what the king has decided. Kasher Diber HaMelech Lemor, as the king had said, Shuvu elai b'yom hashlishi, come back on the third day. Vayan HaMelech esam kosher, and the king gave them the hard, strict answer. Vayazov es atzas hazakenim asher yatzua, and he abandoned the wise counsel of the elders with experience. He spoke in accordance with the advice of the young folk, and he said, again, quoting it again, if my father gave you a hard burden, a heavy burden. V'ani Yosef Elohim, I will add on to your yoke. Avi Yisar Eschem Bashotim, if my father gave you Yisurin with sticks, Ani Ayaser Eschem Biakravim, I will give you Yisurin with scorpions. V'loi Shama HaMelech Eloam, Ki Haisa Siba Miyim Hashem Luman Hakim Estagora Asher Dibur Hashem Biyad Achi Ashilaini El Yeravim Ben Nevat. So this is a difficult pasuk, meaning the pasuk is telling us that logically Rechavam should have understood how foolish this was. Logically, Rechavam should have followed the advice of the Sekenim. But it was Hashem who intervened that he should follow the advice of the Eladim, because this was the mechanism by which Yeravam will now fulfill the nevuah of Achia Hashilaini to establish an independent kingdom. Now, l'chayra, what this means is the following. Had Rechavam been conciliatory, Yeravam still has a commandment. In other words, Yeravam is supposed to establish a malchus no matter what Rechavam says. This is the Einish of Shlomo. But the problem is Yeravam wouldn't have any followers. That's the issue. It's not that Yeravam is rebelling because of this. Yeravam is going to rebel no matter what. But Yeravam only has followers because people see how unreasonable Rechavam is. Therefore, Hashem had to make it, like hardening Paro's heart, Hashem had to make it that Rechavam is unreasonable in order to ensure the fulfillment of the nevuah of Achia Shilani. Now, Lamaisa, we don't have time to be ma'ayin. I think there are a lot of kashas here, because if Achia Shilani gave a nevuah, then once Klal Yisrael is aware of this nevuah, they're mechuyev v'yaimed to rebel. Elamai, they don't know the nevuah, then what gives them a heter to rebel against Malchus Beis David? In other words, if they're rebelling mitzad their dissatisfaction, they're technically a married b'malchus. And if they're rebelling mitzad the nevuah, they don't need this excuse. So the role of this conversation is a bit of a tzarechiyah. But the pasuk says that they didn't rebel because of the nevuah, they rebelled because of Rechavam's stubbornness. By the way, the Gemara comments here that we see that young, inexperienced people, even when they try to do something constructive, it often falls apart. And the older, more experienced people, even if they say something that looks like a surrender, it actually is something that can strengthen the malchus. And Pasuk Tesayin says, "V'yar kol Yisrael ki lo shama hamelech aleim." When the Yidden saw that the Melech was ignoring them, v'yashivu ha'am es hamelech davar leimer, they said to the king, "Ma lanu chelek b'David, who needs to have a portion in the Davidic monarchy? V'lo nachla b'ben Yishai, we don't need a nachla. We don't need our inheritance to be connected to the descendants of Yishai. Li'ohalecha Yisrael. Let's go to our homes and separate ourselves from this dictator. Ata ri'ei beischa David. Look at where your house has gone, David. As if they're speaking to David in the grave. Your house has collapsed. Vayelech Yisrael li'ayalav. They separated. U'bnei Yisrael ha'yeshim bari Yehuda. V'yimloch aleim rechavam. The only segment of Am Yisrael that was mamlech rechavam are the segment of Am Yisrael that is dwelling in the chelek of Yehuda, and that is the tribe of Yehuda and Binyamin. Now, there is another kasha here, which again I don't have a teretz for, and that is, B'pashtus, Shevet Shimon is one of the 10 tribes. It's only Yehuda and Binyamin. Now, Levi we're not counting Bichlal. Levi obviously lived in both territories, the north and the south. But the 2 tribes that were only in the south are Yehuda and Binyamin. And the other 10, which includes Ephraim and Manasseh, were in the north. Now, that means you're including Shimon as part of the northern kingdom. But there's a problem with that. And I'm leaving this as a kasha. I don't really have a yishuv. Because Shimon did not have its own territory. Shimon lived in cities that were interspersed with Arei Yehuda. Now, if you're going to tell me that because they were in Arei Yehuda, they are part of Malchus Rechavam, then L'chaira Rechavam has 3 tribes, Yehuda, Binyamin, and Shimon, and yet all the Mefarshim understand that Rechavam only has Yehuda and Binyamin. So where did Shimon go? Did Shimon leave his Arei Yehuda and go north? Or was there an enclave in the south that also belonged to the north? So this is a kasha that you can think about. What exactly is the role of Shevet Shimon? Okay. Now, then we are told Rechavam tried to stop the revolt. Vayishlach HaMelech Rechavam es Adoram asher alamas. He sent his tax collector to demand that the 10 tribes stay with him. Again, this is very preliminary. Vayirgamu kol Yisrael bo Evan. They stoned him. They killed him by Yamais. Hamelech Rechavam has to get out of Shechem. His life is in danger. He went on a chariot to flee to Yerushalayim. And Vayipshu Yisrael bebeis David hayom hazeh, that Yisrael, the 10 tribes, rebelled against Beis David. And that remained until the time of the writing of this book, which is the Churban of the Beis HaMikdash. Okay. So now remember, note that Yeravam hasn't been coronated yet. This is a breakaway from Rechavam. It's not yet a mamlacha of Yeravam. Vayihi kishmaya kol Yisrael kishav Yeravam. When they heard that Yeravam had come back from Mitzrayim, they now feel that he is the one that is the best suited. Now again, it's not clear if this was because they knew the Nevuah or they didn't know the Nevuah. A lot of things are not clear here. Vayishlechu vayikru oso el ha'eda. They summoned him in front of all of the congregation. Yamlichu oso al kol Yisrael. They made him the melech al Yisrael. Lo haya acharei beis David zulasi shevet Yehuda levadai. The only tribe that remained loyal was Shevet Yehuda. Again, the Mefarshim say that this means Binyamin as well. And I had raised the kasha of what about Shevet Shimon. Now, Vayavai Rechavam Yerushalayim. Rechavam, Shlomo's son, comes to Yerushalayim. Vayakel as called Beis Yehuda. He assembles Yehuda and Binyamin. Right? Meya u'shmeinim elef bachor Isa Muhammad. He assembles 180,000 soldiers. That's a huge army to fight against the other tribes. Lahashiv esamlucha leRechavam. In other words, Rechavam is going to fight. Vayihi devar Elokim el Shemaya ish Elokim lemor. A nevuah comes to a navi whose name is Shemaya. Emor el Rechavam ben Shlomo melech Yehuda. V'yal kol beis Yehuda u'Binyamin. V'yeser ha'am. Speak to Rechavam and Shevet Yehuda and Binyamin and any other people, because the truth of the matter is people from the 10 tribes did live in Malchus Yehuda, so there were bits and pieces of them, but they didn't have any territory. And speak to these people saying the following: Kai Amar Hashem, Loi Sa'alu, do not wage war, Lo Silachamun Imachechem B'nei Yisrael, do not wage war against the 10 tribes. Shuvu ish lebeiso, every person should return to his house. Ki me'iti niya hadavar hazeh. It is from me, it is from Hashem that this rebellion is taking place. It is decreed by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, b'nevuah, that the 10 tribes are going to have a separate kingdom. And what happened was, Vayishmu es devar Hashem, v'yashuvu lo lechet kidvar Hashem. The armies of Yehuda and Binyamin obeyed this prophecy, and they did not try to fight Yeravam ben Nevat. Okay, so now Yeravam is the king of the north, Rechavam is the king of the south. Yeravam has 10 tribes, Rechavam only has 2. Vayiven Yeravam es Shechem b'har Ephraim v'yesheba, so Shechem became his capital. He built Shechem in the mountainous territory of Ephraim, and that's where he dwelt. And Vayetze Misham, and then he left Shechem. Vayiven es Penuel. Now Penuel, you remember, is in the Chumash. This is where Yaakov wrestled with the Malach. This is near Shechem, and it's called Penuel. And he built up Shechem, and then he built up Penuel, but Shechem was his capital. But Yeravam still has a concern, because the Beis HaMikdash is still in Yerushalayim, and any Jew that wants to be Eila Regel has to go to Yerushalayim. So Yeravam is afraid that by having that connection to Yerushalayim, people might be nimshach, to be connected with Malchus Beis David, and they will leave him. Vayomer Yeravam b'libai. Yeravam said to himself, Ata toshav hamamlacha leBeis David. I am afraid that the monarchy will go back to Beis David and my Malchus will collapse. Im yala amazeh lasei sevachim b'Beis Hashem b'Yerushalayim. If this nation will bring korbanos in the house of Hashem in Yerushalayim, v'shav leiv ha'am hazeh el adonaiim, and the heart of my people will be drawn to their prior master, Rechavam, the king of Shlomo, the king of Yehuda, v'haraguni, and maybe they'll even assassinate me. V'shavu el Rechavam melech Yehuda. I am concerned. Now he's calling him melech Yehuda, not melech Yisrael. V'yivayitz hamelech. So the king sought advice as to what to do. Vayash shnei eglei zahav. He built 2 golden calves, like the Egel Azav in the Midbar. Vayomer aleim. And he said to his people, he didn't allow them to go to Yerushalayim. He had guards on the border that nobody could cross the boundary, like East Germany, West Germany. And he said, again, this is parallel to the language of the Chumash, Hine Elohecha Yisrael. These are your gods, Israel. Asher helucha me'eretz Mitzrayim. Now again, similar to the Chet HaEgel itself, this was not pure Avodah Zarah. Even the Yidden by the Egel did not believe this was their God, but they believed it was the intermediary force. Just as Moshe was an intermediary, and Moshe is not here, they thought they needed an intermediary because they weren't worthy of that relationship with God. So Yeravam is trying to do the same thing. It's not Avodah Zarah Mamish, but it's an intermediary to take the place of the Makam HaMikdash. And it's also brought down that the shore is a remez to Yosef. Yosef is called shore, Bechor Shayrei Hadarlai, and Yeravam is from Yosef, and the 2 Agalim are Keneged Ephraim and Menashe, that leadership should belong to Yosef. Vayosem esoechad beBeisel. 1 Egel was in the city of Beisel. That's where Yaakov had his dream. V'yesoechad nasan badan. Dan is further north. Vayehi hadavar hazeh lechatas. And this was a great sin of Yeravam ben Nevat. Vayelchu ha'am lifnei echad adan. Some of the nation that were closer to Dan, to the north, they went to the Egel of Dan. Vayas es beis bamais, and Yeravam built altars in Dan to this Egel. Vayas kaihanim miktzei sa'am asher lo hayu mibnei Levi, and Yeravam appointed kaihanim to serve on this bama to the Egel. Again, they were serving Hashem, but through this intermediary. And these kohanim for Shtetzach were not from Shevet Levi. And also Yeravam made up a holiday. Vayas Yeravam Chag b'Chodesh Hashmini b'Chamisha Asher Yom LaChodesh Kechag Asher b'Yehuda. Right? There's a famous holiday, the 15th of the 7th month. The 7th month counting from Tishrei. Counting from Nisan is Tishrei. So the 15th of the 7th month is Sukkos. Yeravam made a new holiday. The 8th month, Cheshvan, Mar Cheshvan, that doesn't have holidays. He created a holiday that was unique to him, the 15th day of the 8th month, which is Cheshvan, and the Yalom Mizbeach, and he made korbanos on the Mizbeach that day, and that's what he did in Dan, and he did the same thing in Beisel. Keinasa beBeisel, Lizabech li'agolam Sharasa, to slaughter korbanos to these golden calves. For him in Bebeisel, just as he did in Dan, Kohane Abamais, Kehanim for these altars, Asher Rasa. Vayal al hamizbeach Asher Rasa Bebeisel. Again, it's kind of repeating it separately for Dan and for Beisel. It's a bit of a kasha. Why repeat the same things for both? But the way it's written, we first say what was done in the Egel of Dan, up in the north, then we say what was done in Beisel. And Vayal al Mizbech Asher Asa Bebeisel b'Chamisha Siyam b'Chodesh Hashmini b'Chodesh Asher Bada Milibai. This was the month and the holiday that he just made up. Vayas Chag Livnei Yisrael Vayal al Hamizbeach Lahakdir. So already we see that Yeravam ben Nevat is so consumed with jealousy and gaiva that he's not allowing the Yidden to travel to the Beis HaMikdash. He has built 2 Eglei Zahav. He has korbanos that are brought there. And he even made Yom Tov. I'm assuming that the pshat is, he didn't just make a new Yom Tov. He was Iker. In other words, in order to take away people's connection to the Mikdash, he made a holiday that has no shaychus to the Mikdash. He essentially moved Sukkot to Cheshvan, and he was Iker, the observance of Sukkot, in Tishrei. And in that way, people did not feel any connection to the Beis HaMikdash because this holiday has no shaychus to what's going on in the Mikdash. So again, a Freilich Chanukah and Kol Tov.